Good day, everyone. How are you doing at day 2 of Change Now? Still alive and kicking, hopefully. Yeah, maybe you have an afternoon dip and there will be no snacks here, but there is definitely gonna be some food for thought during this session on circular economy, where we'll discuss sending overconsumption to the bin. My name is Sandy Snook and I'm a Belgium-based host and moderator, and I'm so glad that we will discuss some key levers for reducing resources and product overconsumption, a crucial step in lowering our negative environmental impacts. And this session will consist of 3 parts. We'll first listen to the keynote of an innovation waste manager, Tom Szaky. Then we'll have Eva Gladek and Martín López Cardozo on stage for a panel discussion. And the third part will be about a collaboration in the textile industry sphere. At least I hope that you will stay with us during the whole session. First things first, the keynote of Tom Szaky. His name might ring a bell for quite a lot of people because, as I said before, he's some innovation waste manager. He's a true pioneer in that area. And he's the founder of 2 companies. First of all, there's TerraCycle, and he will tell us a little bit more on how they manage waste, but also how we can recycle better and how we can use more recycled content, and especially how can we reuse less. But for Tom, it doesn't end with recycling. He really wants to close the loop, and therefore he founded a company called Loop in 2019, and he will tell us more about the lessons that he learned from launching in 6 different countries and what are the key ingredients to scale reuse. So we're really curious to hear all about it. So give him a big round of applause for Tom Szaky.
So it's a real pleasure to be with you today to talk about my favorite topic in the world, which is waste. To give a context on what we have learned and what works in the world of recycling, I hope we can get the presentation up in a moment there on the screen. I want to tell you sort of our journey around waste and what have been the key learnings throughout, because they all compound to how can we make ambitious projects like reuse really scale. Now, the first thing I want to highlight for you is we operate here in France, but 21 countries around the world. And one of the interesting things we've noticed is in wealthy countries like France or Canada or other markets, we're able to operate as a for-profit company. In emerging countries like Thailand, which is why you see it there in blue, we operate as a non-profit organization. The key lesson I've learned in this space around circular economy is that it's all about money flow. Why things are not circular is about money flow. How to get them to be circular is about money flow. And money flows in a wildly different way in wealthy versus emerging markets. Now, we talk a lot in the world of circular economy about what things are made from, right? It's almost the primary question. Should it be glass or should it be fiber or polymer? And today, I would argue, we're in this great fiberization moment. Many package forms are moving into paper and fiber-based solutions. And it's interesting to watch this because I would argue these are not the foundational questions we should be asking. Shouldn't we ask what systems these materials move in? And is the system honoring the material? And when I mean honoring, that means that we're not requiring more extraction to occur. Because when you look at the impact of any material type, extraction is the primary environmental impact from any indicator that is out there, and that is what we really need to avoid. So as we think about open systems, the first step in moving from a linear system to a closed one is to think about the world of recycling. And the key question here is what really drives recyclability? Imagine if you in this audience saw a coin just on the floor. What would be the biggest coin that would get you to step out of your seat and go pick it up? Let's say you said, it would be a 20-cent euro coin. Why would you not go for a smaller coin? And the reason you probably wouldn't is your cost of stepping up and collecting it and your cost of processing it is too high and it's not worth it. All coins are money, but there's many coins we're going to leave on the ground. And it's the exact same thing with waste. Certain waste streams, we bother collecting and recycling in open systems because they are profitable to do so. And other waste streams, we don't bother. We in fact pay people to dispose them because they cost more to collect and process than they're worth. You know, most of the time in the recycling world, people ask about, can technically something occur? Can technically something compost? Can technically it be recycled? And it's an irrelevant question. The only question that is important is, will something happen? And on the will something happen side, the only driver of that is, can the company who is doing it make money? The reason, for example, most composters don't like compostable packaging is because they lose money when they interact with it. The reason a product, if it's too small or too complicated, made from multiple materials, is challenging for recyclers is that it costs more to collect and process than the results are worth. That is the essence of, in open systems, what drives circularity. So what can you do, right? You can make your products out of more expensive materials that will intrinsically build circularity into them, but the products will become more expensive. You can have governments create taxes, like extended producer responsibility taxes, that fuel these systems. On what we do with voluntary systems, this is our overall equation. You know, you have to have someone pay to cover the cost of what it costs to collect and process something minus what it's worth. The secret to the equation is not that, by the way. That's the intuitive aspect. To get companies to voluntarily lean in and really scale programs, it's the relationship between the last two circles. How do you show them that there's more value that they're going to get? Not from the material, but from creating these systems, then the cost, and then these systems can flourish. And we've been able to, there's no waste stream that is excluded from this, whether it's cigarette recycling, already 1 billion cigarettes have been collected and recycled, whether it's PPE, whether it's dirty diapers in France or Holland or Japan, whether it's tights or contact lenses, hundreds of millions per year recycled through systems like this. Toy recycling in Australia, or oral care recycling in the UK. It goes on, and there's no limit, whether it's recycling at hospitals in France or high-end luxury boutiques in China, whether it's blister pack recycling or shoes and objects, pet food bags, and even systems you can see here at retailers, and large examples. In the end, it's the money flow that you really need to think about. So when you create an object, don't ask what it could do, but ask the system that you're putting it in on what it will do, and how can you adjust that, especially from the monetary point of view. Now that gets the system bent a little bit. But the next part in the recycling circular economy is that we also have to make our products from waste. And that's a very different question than, can it be recycled? They actually have nothing to do with each other. Isn't it interesting that if producers are using a material like PET, that's the same material a soda bottle is made from, whether they're making a backpack, a t-shirt, a shampoo bottle, whatever it may be, if they're using recycled content, the input is almost always soda bottles. It's not t-shirts from t-shirts, it's not shampoo bottles from shampoo bottles, it's almost always soda bottles. And it comes to the same foundational tension of economics, because why do we do this? It's because we design products from a virgin mentality. That is to say, we design products from what virgin materials are able to do. And then later we think about substituting in recycled materials. And the only recycled material that behaves like virgin characteristically in price and performance are beverage containers. But the problem is, you know, once you make a beverage container into a t-shirt, you can't make that t-shirt into a beverage container or a shampoo bottle or whatever it may be. So when we work with organizations, we think about how can we create foundationally closed systems. This is the world's first pen from used pens. Or the shoe I'm wearing is a shoe that we made for the Olympics here in Paris that is made from itself. But to truly integrate closed systems, the shoe had to be fully redesigned so that it could be taken apart and foundationally put back into itself. We had a fun moment here actually in Paris when the Olympics occurred, because we also were the company who collected all the raw material from beaches and rivers in France to build the podiums. So when a Japanese athlete or an Australian athlete won the medal, they were wearing this shoe on a podium, also made entirely from waste collected here in the aquatic systems. So then we get to a little taste of what fuels a circular economy of recycling. The key essence is it's the economic flow that is the most important to think about. But then the next question is, how do we compress this into a circular economy of reuse? When we first started this question, and our entire sort of journey on reuse, which began in 2017, we asked ourselves, why did the world change from how it used to be? Most of the world up until the 1950s was in reusable systems. Our clothing was reused, you know, we cobbled our shoes, we darned our socks, we mended our clothing, which is why we consumed very few garments per year. And the same came in consumables. And the first idea that became really interesting to us is the package back in these models was an asset to the manufacturer. The manufacturer was motivated to make it long-lasting and durable. It was their problem if it broke. And it was their advantage if it was able to withstand many, many uses. And then a really strange moment happened in the 1950s, which is really when the idea of garbage was invented. This is a positive photo from the 1950s celebrating the incredible convenience of disposability. No longer do you have to wash anything, no longer do you have to reuse anything, you can just throw it all away. And I know it looks as a horrific photo today, but I would encourage you to empathize with why the actors in this photo are smiling, because it was authentic. And by the way, it still wins today. Think about how much disposable consumption we have voted for while we've been here today. If you took a cup of coffee, we voted for it, right? In a sustainability environment, we're voting for it, constantly. But it's easy to vilify disposability. I think the important component is to think about the dynamics that shifted and what are its virtues. Its foundational virtue is convenience and affordability. It's super cheap and super convenient, right? That's why it wins all the time. But a really strange thing happened. The package became a cost to the manufacturer, a cost of goods sold, and as such became our property, which of course we don't want it to be. And so the first thought we had on Loop was, wait a minute, if we move from disposable package forms, where every day they are cheaper tomorrow than today, back into package forms that are an asset, we can amazingly elevate packaging and make it so much more exciting and reusable at the very same time. And we thought, let's go begin with brands. We went to all of our partners, 200 of the world's biggest consumer product companies joined, and produced packaging like this. Everything here you see is real and was all made, whether it's with Nestle or Unilever, whether it's with Clorox for white packaging, all the way to ice cream packaging. And I would argue, that's the most beautiful ice cream package in the planet today. Or this is the most beautiful way to package this soap. It absolutely worked, and it showed that you can elevate packaging and really redefine the economic boundary, because instead of this cost of this package being impregnated into the product at 100% on every use, it is simply the depreciation of the package and the cost of cycling it, collecting it and cleaning it that is impregnated into the product. So you can elevate in a wonderful way. Then we said, well, okay, what do we need next once this can function from the producers? And we realized we need a model that is as close to as convenient for consumers as possible to disposability. Instead of vilifying disposability, let's put it on a pedestal and try to get as close to it as absolutely possible. Make reuse feel like disposable consumption, because that's how we think we can get the masses to adopt such an idea. So we said a key to that is to create a system where you can buy anywhere and return anywhere. Buy a bottle of soda from Carrefour and drop it off at Lidl, and then buy like a shampoo bottle at Lidl and drop it off at Systemu, and so on. And simply speaking, you get products that you purchase, you pay a deposit on, you drop it off at any retailer, and then it gets sorted, cleaned, and back it goes. Now, when we went to the retailers all around the world, in Canada, in the US, in the UK, France, and Japan, those are the 5 countries we decided to take experiments in, they all said, we need to understand if our consumer cares about this. Does the mass market consumer, is this something they're going to resonate with? So we began by launching online pilots all over the world. Again, in those countries, in Asia, Europe, and in North America, with all the biggest retailers in those countries. Here in France, it was with Carrefour, a website called Ma Boutique Loop, where online you could then buy these products and return them. After that worked, and by the way, the most interesting learning in this, because in many global companies would say, oh, sustainability matters to Europeans, but doesn't matter to Americans as much. You could not tell the difference between a French consumer, a Japanese consumer, an American consumer. The response was identical. And I think that's so important as we think about, especially if you're a global organization. Maybe the regulations are different in France versus, say, the US. Maybe the political environment is different, but the consumers behave the same. They really foundationally do. So once this worked, we said, let's turn this off and focus on bringing this into in-store environments because we don't want to be a retailer. So we took this and we transitioned it to a number of in-store pilots, over 40 in-store pilots all over the world with the leading brands and biggest retailers. And this is where the biggest lesson for me emerged. Every single place we got it up and running, operationally functions, we're able to loop even complicated things like baby food and pass the health and safety requirements of large baby food providers, shampoo, laundry detergent, anything, it worked. And the consumers behaved. But we couldn't move out of pilot. We really struggled with, every retailer basically said, we'll continue to learn and learn and learn, but we will only move out of pilot when there's regulatory risk that is going to force us to do so. And why? Why does it require regulatory risk? And this was a key learning for me. In the end, most in this industry, in consumer products, the business is incrementality, right? If you're a shampoo company, you want to invent the concept of conditioner. And if you're a toothpaste company, you want to invent the concept of mouthwash. Or if you're laundry detergent, let's invent fabric softener. This is how businesses foundationally grow because you create bigger assortments of products to purchase. In reuse, you don't. You make the product better, and there's some added complexity greater than zero. And that will be resisted. There's absolutely no question. So we pushed and we pushed, and there's only one country in the world that decided, let's move out of pilot and really take it to industrial scale, which is France. In France, it has grown phenomenally. It's already in 400 stores, 400 different products, not just beverages, but food, refrigerated, frozen, personal care, home care, OTC pharmaceutical, whether it's in Carrefour or even in shelf, whether it's in Monoprix or Système or many, many other retailers. And it has really thrived. The economics are better in reuse in certain packages than buying it new. So what is different here than anywhere else? And there's three things we discovered that we believe are the cornerstone requirements to make a reuse system scale and not just be a pilot for some PR. There needs to be regulatory risk. Here we have the eject laws, we have PPWR that's going to help quite a bit in Europe, but that is incredibly important. If you're in America, I think states like California or Oregon will have already regulation that's in this approach. But you don't just need a stick, from a regulatory point of view. You need carrots. Carrots are subsidies. Today, the PROs in France, like CTO and others, have to dedicate 5% of their annual revenue to funding reuse, which allows for there to be a subsidy while the models are small and competing head-to-head against very mature models of disposability. But you also need one critical actor, which is the retailer. Remember, the god of the brands, right, is really the retailer, who can move them and use their own carrots and sticks to make sure that there is an ecosystem. And I'll talk about why ecosystems in brands are very important. And then, why does disposability win? It's because it's incredibly convenient, and reuse suffers from chronic inconvenience. So we have to really put convenience on a pedestal and make reuse behave like disposability as close as possible, make it feel like a throwaway system, and not just for the consumer, but for the other actors as well, the producers and the retailers, because if it's inconvenient in supply chain, it's also going to be a very big problem. So let's begin with consumers. The biggest unintuitive lesson in consumers is that consumers don't want to try one reusable product. They need an ecosystem of products to jump in and try and to return. Because in reuse, you have to sell the good, but you also have to get it back. Here's a really interesting experiment that we had with Carrefour, where we looked at express stores in Paris, and on one end, we put 5 products, a couple of water products, some sodas, and a beer. And then in exactly the same type of stores, we put those same products, except the beer, but 30 other products, from Nutella to shampoo and so on and so forth. And if you're in consumer products, you will think that the products on the left should sell much more than the products on the right. And in fact, when there was the assortment, the Coca-Colas and others sold 300% more and returned 600% more. But it's also critical to create convenience for the brands. While we were really seduced by this idea of elevating packaging, the reality is, let's bring reuse to the simplest package forms where you have to make about no changes, whether it's a wine bottle or baby food or gin or chickpeas and so on. And that creates this whole ecosystem of growth. And so the biggest lesson I would leave you with is that if we're going to shift from a disposable system to a system without waste, where reuse, I think, is the foundational answer, we need to encourage the right regulatory landscape, evidenced by where we've failed and where we've succeeded, and it has to be fiercely convenient for absolutely every actor, the consumers, but also the brands and the retailers. With that said, thank you.